One day was Zelda out in the forest on a ride by herself when she heard some sounds in the distance. She tried to follow that sound, but her horse was getting spooked, and didn't want to even go any further. So she hopped down from the horse, tied it for a tree, and walked further by herself. And she noticed it's actually Volga. Volga is doing some training by himself. Even though that Zelda is standing behind some trees to try to peek on him, not trying to be disturbing him during his training, because she knows that he has ability to transform himself into part of dragon or entirely dragon. But during his training, though, she sees that his hands are transform into claws and shooting fire, and even transform himself into a dragon to do some trainings of all kind of exercise. In her mind, Volga is quite handsome. And after that, she's been looking at him, almost like which felt forever. But it was only like maybe 20 minutes before suddenly Volga stopped. He transformed back to his human form. And Zelda was about to leave when she walked slowly backwards. But as she did that, she stepped on a twig that snapped. And Volga, who was looking under the direction, heard the twig snap. He quickly turned around and saw Zelda in the forest. But he didn't do anything. He just stand there. And they actually locked eyes between each other for only a few seconds, but it felt like an eternity. And after that, Zelda quickly walked backwards and hopped on her horse and continued riding back to the castle. But during her way back to the castle, her heart was beating a lot faster because she had heard some stories about Volga, that he's a very strong warrior and even strong leader type. But even despite knowing that, she had never actually talked to him personally. She wanted to talk to him, but after knowing that he has this, when she first heard about this transformer ability, that this transformation ability that he had, it made her spook of it. Because at first she didn't even believe, if she wanted to believe this kind of stories, that he can transform his hands or himself to a dragon. But to experience this for the very first time was actually quite an amazing, but also a little bit terrifying, because she had no idea how he would react, or if he was even following her behind her on a distance. Every time when she was running backwards to the castle, she looked backwards, not even in the sky, but no signs of him anywhere. At least she didn't feel relieved that he was even following her. She didn't even leave the castle for the next couple of days because she was a little bit scared if he would show up, if she was in the castle garden, that he would swoop down and capture her and fly away back fast. But after a while though, her parents was a little bit strangely about that she didn't even leave her own room, or she was walking around in the castle without leaving it. But she actually never mentioned about her first meeting with Volga. But her parents actually knew about him. But they weren't even scared or terrified about him. They actually respected him because he was an actually loyal soldier, or at least a loyal warrior. But he has never been showing any sort of signs of attacking anyone, not even in the castle or in the town where Zelda lived. But despite knowing that maybe Volga may have the chance to burn the entire castle or maybe the town itself down to the ground, but he would never do that. Despite that, Zelda was still very curious to know more about Volga. So when she did leave the castle, but maybe it's about a week later, she walked around in town asking around if any of the townsfolk had any information about Volga, like how strong he is and how long he can be transformed as a dragon, or if his powers just a limit. There wasn't so much information she could get from about Volga, except from the information that she only knew about it. So, only a few days after she had get so much information, despite hearing some of the old info that she only heard about, she decided to go back to the part of the forest where she saw him, hoping maybe that he could be still being there and maybe would get the courage to talk to him. But this time she didn't take her horse. She decided to walk. Despite maybe that even if she had a horse, she may have a small advantage of getting fast back to the castle, but knowing that he's at the part that he can transform into dragon, she may know that he may be even faster by flying in the air and her own horse. He can easily maybe pass by her and land in front of her if she had a horse. So if she was walking, she still could run, but even not running fast enough as a horse. But but that may give her an advantage that she can hide some places maybe that he won't be able to detect her. Maybe like under a tree, or maybe it's on a under in a hole on the ground or something. But that was something that she would have to be taken care of though. She arrived to the forest, but there was no sign of him. She didn't hear anything. She didn't hear any sound of training or any sort of exercise. Maybe that he left the area. Maybe he hasn't been there for about over a week. But as she walked into the area where she found where he was training, there were no signs of him anywhere. Nothing. Not even trace on a burn on the ground or. But as she was about to leave, she heard a sound and slowly turned around, and there he stood next to a tree with arms crossed and just looking at her, and it felt like an eternity, but it was only a few seconds when he spoke. So you are Princess Zelda. So what brings you here, of all places? And first of all, why were you spying on me last week? Here? Hmm? Tell me. I want to know. Zelda was quiet. She was silent. She had no idea what to speak or what to say. But she managed to take big breath and took the courage enough to tell him. She was not even aware that he was there but a week ago, because she was only out for a ride by a horse. She only get aware about him after she heard some sounds, and even though she was amazed to see that he has the ability to transport parts of him or in himself into a dragon. She had only mentioned that she only heard the stories about it and didn't even believe it was even real. But after she saw that herself, she actually believed it. And hearing that made him just chuckle and laugh and said, "Oh yeah, many people doesn't even believe in my powers. But it is true though, your highness. I can transform into a dragon or release my arms to claws, like you see. And then he transformed his right hand to a claw, and it's back to his normal hand again. She was still amazed at his ability that he can transform his arms or his legs or even himself into a dragon at will. She asked him, how long has he been able to do this? And he said, as long as he can remember. He even asked her why she is back here. She said that she wanted to like to talk to him, but to know him better because all this reputation he has as a warrior, and of course the ability to be a dragon or at least part of dragons at will. Even despite all of this, he was actually quite as gentleman. Despite being a furious warrior, he was a gentleman. He actually invited her over to a small place where he stayed. He had made some small camp in the forest where he stayed, and he actually invited her to have something to eat. And she said yes. As they both sat down and had some of the meat stew that he had made, they were actually quite a pleasant meeting with Volga. She asked him why he was staying here, not in a small inn in town, which is not that far. But he preferred to be staying in the nature, because it will only give more, since he has more open space. That would actually give him more space for his training, because he would rather not be in a town or outside the town to be doing his training, because first of all, he didn't want to burn down an entire town by mistake, and two, he didn't want to frighten the people in town despite being a very respectable soldier or a warrior. Even though many people still respect him as a warrior. But there are some people, despite being respect him, are still frightened about his ability. So he preferred to be outside of town, maybe as far as possible, to be training, maybe as like an open field where he can train without have any sort of harm to other people or a town, which she could expect and respected. But she actually invited him to stay at the castle, maybe for a dinner to meet her family, even despite he was trying to deny the offer, but she insisted. After a while, though, he said he will need some time to think about it. And after that, Zelda and Volga spent some more time at his small camp. It was time for her to go back to the castle because she needed to care of some royal duties. She said goodbye, and he said goodbye back. About almost 2 days later, some of the guards actually came to in the throne room where Zelda was spending some time with her parents, saying a warrior is waiting outside and had been said that he has been invited to the castle by Zelda, and his name was Volga. Both the parents actually looked at each other and at their daughter, who is actually explained that it was true. She had actually invited him over dinner for the in castle, and even though that both the parents had heard all stories about him and that he was a respectful warrior and also strong one, so they actually invited him. And the queen told the guard also to tell the cook to prepare for some food. As the cook was getting ready for the maid's dinner, Volga actually spent some time with the king and the queen while Zelda was in the castle garden by herself. Because every time she saw him or even talked to him, her heart was beating a lot faster. She was actually have fallen for him. But despite knowing that he may not be able to be accepted by her parents as to be maybe as her future husband, well, if that would happen, even happen in first place, but at least they respected him as he's a great warrior, and despite his ability to transform to part of a dragon. But there was a lot of things that he didn't know about Zelda. She actually also is quite skilled in magic, but she lacked the ability to transform into any animal, to any other animals. But despite that, she was a skilled in warrior. She was fighting. She was a skilled fighter, and even skilled in magic. Well, partially from depending on what kind of spells she would use. But during the dinner, the king and the Volga actually talked, and even though Zelda tried to listen to the stories they talked about, maybe some of Volga's own experience in battles and even maybe finding some robbers and something like that. Even during dinner, though, Zelda's mother actually asked her if what she thought about Volga. Zelda revealed that she actually did like him, that he was quite handsome, and even though he actually wasn't, she thought maybe that he wouldn't mind her, but or maybe seeing her as his type or type of girl to be with. But Stella's mother actually told her that as long as he actually likes her, wouldn't bother. It wouldn't matter if he likes her or not. So even after dinner was ready all over, it was already dark outside. The king had even offered Volga stay overnight over the castle, which Volga accepted. Despite that, Volga and the king went to the small lobby where they were talking more over some wine and just talking. Zelda, though, she was actually quite curious to know more about him, but she preferred to go back to her own room, even though she wanted to know more about him. And it turned out the king actually had invited him to stay at the castle for the next couple of days, and he accepted, which surprised Zelda though. But that would give her at least more time to get to know him better, and maybe hopefully to tell him how she feels. It took her almost 3 whole days to be telling him about her feelings for him, and shockingly, he actually he didn't even laugh at her. Well, not that as directly towards her, but he chuckled a little bit and said that he actually did like her because she did remind somehow about himself. A lot of personality, the like it was that both are skilled fighters, and some of much being others. But despite that, Zelda actually was happy to be telling him. And even that, their relationship between them actually was started. They even told her parents about this. They were actually really quite happy about to know that Zelda may have found her future husband. Even though her father joked about teasing her about, so, my daughter, when is the wedding with Volga? During breakfast, even when Volga was present, Zelda just almost choked on her breakfast and said, Dad, don't tell me it's like that. We just want to start dating. Even though her father was loved teasing his own daughter small things. But you know that. Even though Volga himself wasn't even bothered about this teasing, he actually just smiled and said, maybe one day, Your Highness, maybe one day. But as she said, we just been start seeing each other. But then it happened. Volga was gone. He left the castle, but he actually came back only about a day later because he decided to be doing some practice by himself not as a secret, but he did actually tell Zelda about where it was going, and he wanted just be alone for some time to his training, which she accepted and respected that. Even after all this, there's a lot of things between Zelda and Volga that actually occurred. It happened when during winter, Zelda was actually very sick. She was sick by the flu, and Volga seems to be almost immune to this. Well, it seems almost like, but he wasn't even himself had signs of the flu also, but not as much as Zelda did. He actually looked after her while she was sick, which she really appreciated. He told her some about his old adventures before he actually met her, and hearing those stories made her smile and, feeling happier inside, realized he may be the soulmate that she had been waiting for, the right man to be with. Despite knowing her father once had told during the breakfast only a while back, saying, what if they would get married at some point later on? Even though that Zelda herself has said maybe, just maybe, if when, and also when both of them were ready for you to take that next step. But Zelda said it might take some, perhaps in a few more years before that even happened. But in fact, she was right. Because with the next 4 years, Volga had actually been talking to both the both the queen and the king, about a potential proposal to Zelda. He actually felt ready to do so, and the king said, "Well, Volga, you may have decided for a good thing because we have been talking that maybe it was time for our daughter to maybe take the throne with the next few years, and having you as her husband and the king, the next future king of the entire kingdom of Hyrule, made a bad choice. Not a better choice for that." Even Volga then later took Zelda to the castle garden during the time at noon the very next day though, and even proposed to her. She actually started crying, but she said yes. She could not even believe it. That actually did happen. And the news of this entire wedding was well spread within only the next few days. They even rented a small house. Well, they had a small building of like a small cabin only a short distance from outside town where they had their honeymoon for about a week. But they actually didn't become the next rulers until another 4 more years when the king and the queen had officially decided to step down from the throne so the daughter could take over. Since both her parents was getting older and she was still very young and would still have time to get to know about as the next ruler. But the king has decided to remain by the next king and queen as a royal advisor, which Zelda gladly accepted. Because even though despite she has been a princess from many before then, with having her father's wisdom and guidance upon this new as she need as the next queen would be valuable both to her and Volga. But just barely after about 2 years from the next that she had been the new queen, she and Volga announced they were expecting twins. One boy and a girl after they found out apparently. And when the twins were about 10, the boy showed had same ability as his own father that he can turn into a dragon. But the daughter, though, she was actually quite normal, but she had ability to perform magic like her mother. Even only but when the twins were about 12, only 2 years later, Zelda gave birth to another daughter, who also had, but this time she had inherited her father's ability to transform the dragon either by hands or entirely, and the ability to perform magic like her mother. And that was actually something unique, which hasn't been happened in the family like ever, except that Zelda was the very first in her family line to perform magic in a few generations. But having a daughter, well, it's two daughters, to be able to perform magic, quite amazing for both Zelda and Volga. But both of them was actually quite happy to being able to have a family of them together. And especially if Zelda hasn't been riding into that particular forest all those years ago, she would never have found or even met her future husband, and even especially to found her true love. And if Volga hadn't even been on the spot if Zelda came there, he had never been able to meet his future wife and his true love either. And both of them was actually quite happy to being able to see each other at the same spot, despite they didn't even speak after one the first time when they saw each other. Even though all years later Zelda didn't mention to Volga, she was a bit scared that he would follow her back to the castle or maybe take her. He was laughing about that, even this crazy idea she had about that. But she even laughed also because she realized even despite having the ability, he was a true gentleman. And for that, she loved him even more, and especially having this big family with Volga. And that's how Volga and Zelda are the true love of a big family. The end.